Okay, I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. We'll start out, we have a request, assignment for request for council action. We have several for the Finance Committee. We have 1515, subscription and maintenance contract for Emergitech. 1516, expenditure over $15,000 for North Gateway Tire for the police. 1517, expenditure over $15,000 for ProTech Security Sales for the police. 1518, expenditure over $15,000 for Advances Law Enforcement. 1519, amending salaries and benefits code section 3105, pay scale revision. 1520, rezoning from R3 to SPD2. 1521, amending ordinance 1211, sports activity fee. 1522, discounted membership to recreation center. 1523, preliminary agreement with Silling Municipal Courthouse. 1524, budget amendments. 1525, agreement with OHWAR and Ohio Warren. First item we have is 15004, amending codified ordinances section 50701S and 50703. This came, I think last time we talked about a little bit from the mayor, and there might be a modification to it.
Yes, sir. So originally, we were looking at section 3104 F of the Salary and Benefits Code, which is the code that permits persons to take vehicles home, and just adding another section with vehicles. And then in discussions with Mr. Huber, he felt we have the Clean Indoor Act that reflects what the state law is on smoking in public places, and so modifying that section to prohibit vehicles owned or controlled by the city, as well as changing the definition of smoking to include e-cigarettes. It's a new thing now. It kind of takes care of both of those. So there's a recommendation to modify 507.01S, which is the definition, and then to add 507.03A, which is the prohibition specific to city vehicles.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 1510, transfer of 244 Medina Street to CAC. If you recall, we held this one. Bill had a concern and question and wanted to further research whether or not there would be any other kind of city or municipality in the state of Ohio that would quote-unquote give away property, and he tried to research that and he did not find any in the state of Ohio. And he also mentioned in an email to me that he did find examples in other states, but he wanted to know if we could delay the vote, so he wanted to look at other options till the next meeting, or if we felt we wanted to go forward, but he requested that if we would delay it one more meeting. But that's up to us to make the determination if we want to do that. Do you have anything else, Bill? Ken? So what do people want to do? What do you feel? Is it going to matter if there's other options, or are we going to transfer it to the CIC and have the CIC dispose of it?
I mean, for that particular incident, that's what he was going to research, is if in the state of Ohio there was other
Right.
areas, and obviously there is none. And I don't know other options that he would be talking about. I don't think it would probably be detrimental to wait, but I think we could probably drag this on forever. My vote was I was in favor of turning it over to CIC. So I would vote not to delay it.
Mr. Coyne, I talked to him directly, Bill, before he went down, and he told me he did research. He found other states where they do permit it, but Ohio obviously doesn't. And the law is very specific when it's unused or unneeded city property. There's an ordinance that says it must be done in the fashion that we're talking about, even with the CIC. So then I got a call from a former councilman, Chet Simmons, because he had seen the article in the paper and was not aware of whether or not the council was aware of us turning over where the old west side was to Habitat to build houses. So then I called, and I was not able to talk to him directly, but I left a message for him telling him that that was our first request, was to turn it over to Habitat, but because of the neighboring house and the problems going on there, that they were not interested in the properties. They weren't interested in the properties on West Friendship, and this one is adjacent to the same house or one property away, so, you know, they would be in the same position with it. But I just wanted to pass those two things on to the rest of you.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
you said, or Bill said it's not permitted in the state. What's he trying to permit going there? I guess I'm kind of lost.
He'd like to give the lot to,
Somebody that's going to invest to build on it, or?
well, or maybe a nonprofit or something that's gonna help the neighborhood without actually having to purchase it. And I guess I kind of see it the same as, for example, and our hands are tied with the state law, the bicycles at the auction. You know, if I had my way philosophically, the nice thing to do would be go down to Union Square and some of the Section 8 complexes where kids don't have a bicycle to ride and let them pick one, instead of taking 100 bikes down to the pole barn and having somebody give us $20 for the whole lot of them. But the law says that that property has to go through that public bid and auction. And I see this property as no different from that. There are a lot of nice things we could possibly do with it, but we're still bound by the law that says this is the method we have to use.
And Mayor's example was exactly what my point, my example was a couple of weeks ago, in that we sell our property through the public auction. The CIC was set up for these types of things. This is a perfect vehicle for us to do it. And I, like Denny, would vote in favor of pushing this forward today.
And if I could just add to my comments, I respect Mr. Lamb, and I respect his idea, but what sold the case for me was just the comments Mr. Huber made, that there could be, you know, some other citizen could form a suit against the city for not giving it to them, or, you know, us using taxpayer money to give to somebody else. So, thank you.
So Mayor, is our game plan to send it over to CIC and then they would auction it off? Is that
Yes.
how I'm? okay.
Yes. That, because the CIC is a branch of the city government in its present form, where the majority
Okay.
is council members. Mr. Huber and I have talked about that, and we can't treat that as separately as a CIC in another city where it's funded, you know, with other money other than cities. So because of the link currently with the CIC, it pretty much has to follow the same rules as we do.
Okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, we gave them an opportunity, and it's still, I mean, this is, obviously every property's different, but I mean, this is so, the stamp of it's so small, the limited use. I mean, to me, my biggest concern is, you know, at least recoup, or CIC at least recoup the amount that we've spent in taxes on that, so.
Jim?
As a member of CIC, I've been ready to do this, so I'm ready at this point.
I'm good either way. I was actually contacted by somebody who was interested in buying that property, but they have no intention of doing anything with it, but they're in no hurry either, so I could go either way, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that you're correct. I mean, Bill did have an opportunity, and I think the consensus of the group here is to transfer to the CIC, to enable the CIC to do an auction, raise a little bit of money, pay for the costs associated with carrying the taxes on the property or any other costs associated, you know, with insurance or allocation of that amount, and see if they can do something with it to help develop it. And I think the CIC's goal would be to keep it in the community and make it a community investment and make it a long-term housing prospect rather than rental housing, if possible, to build a community and build a neighborhood back up. So I'm okay with that also, because I think the goal of Bill is still being achieved, is to rejuvenate the community and the residential neighborhood, so to speak. So I think that's important. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to transfer 244 Medina Street to the CIC.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 15013, 2014 carry forward appropriation request. I made the request, and I believe if you see attached, the numbers regarding the estimated carry forward for the various accounts were generated from Keith's office. And it includes, of course, the carry forwards of projects that are already in process. That's why when you look at the carry forward number of $9.4 million, it looks quite large, but there's multiple things going on that we've been working on for several years that a lot of that money's been earmarked for already. So that's what all those numbers are for.
Do we know that magic number by chance
Foot number.
of the 9.4 that's actually encumbered?
I mean, you could go through and make a determination of that.
What John's referring to, I think, is things that have been floating along for more than 1
Okay.
year.
Right. Like, for example, the cemetery project's in here, and that's a pretty big number. And I was just going through some of this.
And the reason encumbrances aren't included is encumbrances automatically, without any council action, those appropriations carry forward to the following year.
And the, what another one I just saw in here, there's another big one that, let's see here.
Nina's vac truck?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, leaf program vehicle, 130,000, that one's in there. So a lot of these items that are making up these numbers are things that we have as a carry forward for something to do. Pool buildings and structures, there's 230,000 in there that we've been carrying forward for a few years to make a determination of what we want to do with that. So yes, there are a lot of monies in here. Now, what's this one for local license, 937,000? That's Keith, the local license for vehicles,
What fund is that?
105.
I think it's vehicles, because I think that's what we pay for out of the local license fund, is the vehicles in the street department.
Okay, that's all of them.
And they don't purchase them until they're needed.
So that's like $1 million there that we have sitting in that fund for those vehicles.
We need that money
You sure you do? Yeah.
before you start eyeing it up. Yeah.
Well, and it's not actually available to anything else anyway, because local license money is limited to use on the streets.
And then you got Gunnison Court here still, 387,000. Fire cap 360, so there's the large numbers that make up a bulk of that $9.4 million, or those items that we discussed and said that, you know, were a priority. And then, of course, you have the airport, 524,000 for, I think that's a jet fuel thing that we talked about for that, so that's in there, so. But I think the goal is, at least from year after year, the monies that's saved up for these projects to allow the department heads to know that they're gonna have that money to complete those projects. And all the smaller amounts in there, the savings that they've occurred in the previous years that haven't been spent. Other questions? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next one is 1515 subscription and maintenance contract for Emergitech. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. This is our renewal for our CAD, our records management, our in-car mobiles, computer system, and the interfaces for all of those systems and priority dispatch, emergency medical, and emergency law enforcement.
Has this changed from, I think we discussed this last year. I mean, this is a yearly contract, or?
Yeah, this is the yearly maintenance subscription fees. We pay a per-seat license fee, which is really worked out well for us.
I just thought that was,
Questions?
Move to approve.
second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next one is 1516 expenditure of $15,000 for North Gateway Tire for the police department. Chief?
This is our main repair center for our cruisers, oil changes, tire issues, mechanical issues. We also use a company, a Ford dealership down south, but this is the main one because of its proximity.
Questions?
Mr. President, I'll have to abstain. A family member is employed by North Gateway.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, we have 1517, expenditure of $15,000 to ProTech Security Sales, Police Department. Chief?
This company is the one that we get our ballistic vests from for the officers, that type of law enforcement equipment. Every year we replace, every 5 years, we replace the vests of the individual officers, and we have it on a rotating basis, so that's what this money will
What do we normally do with the vest once they're rotated out? Where do they go?
go. You just discard them,
Oh,
they're not usable.
Not good for
I mean,
anything.
They don't stand behind them after that. We did ask the court at some, sorry.
We talked about this last week.
I'm getting old.
I think actually LSD got a couple of them last year or the year before.
well, those aren't old vests, though, those are,
Oh,
well, they're not old by age.
okay.
We went to a different model.
So we've looked at whether they could be put in like the door skins of the car
Mm.
to help give some extra protection, whether they could be used in the court for
Mhm.
protection. But generally, we've not found a good purpose for them. The company will not stand behind them after the 5 years, so.
Move to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 1518, expenditure over $15,000 for advances law enforcement.
This is our main source of ammunition and replacement firearms for the police department.
Move to approve?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is 1519, next one, amending salaries and benefit code 3105 for city council. This came about as our clerk obtained the certification, and I think when well, there you go. We revised the pay scale through ordinance 13411, and it was step 12 of 4 to 14, A through F, listed step 12 for the clerk of 14 when certification was received. As you know, Kathy received her certification, so this was not included in the modifications and revisions to section 3501, including council. So the amendment would put the clerk of council at a pay grade 104 with the certification in accordance with 3104D and 3108D. And it would be retroactive till January 1st of 2015. What do you guys think?
Yeah, we made a pretty
That's
good
a
deal
toughie.
about it at the last meeting, so.
I thought that was enough, no?
Very nice. Sure you did.
All right, any questions?
Do we need the emergency clause for the,
Well, it's gonna be retroactive no matter what, I guess.
If you're retroactive, I mean, it's
move to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Congratulations again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next item we have is 1520. This is rezoning from R3 to SPD 2. Jonathan?
Yes. This is, as you said, a rezoning request by Clover Construction to, for 10 and a half acre parcels of land at the, to the north 10 and a half acres of the former Pythian Sisters property at Huntington. And this parcels go between Huntington and Minor Drive. They are requesting a special planning district, which allows for a little flexibility in the development of the property outside of the rigors of the regular zoning districts. So on December 11th, the Planning Commission reviewed the request for the rezoning for the construction of a 131 unit, 3-story senior only, that's 55 years and older occupancy multifamily development. A lot of discussion during that meeting. The public came out. The meeting was continued to the January 8th, 2015 meeting for further information regarding the proposed parking supply and ability of the city to enforce or require the senior-only occupancy restriction. On January 8th, 2015, Clover Construction, the applicant, and city staff addressed the concerns brought up during the December 11th, 2014 meeting as applicable to those two entities. And the Planning Commission reviewed and ultimately recommended approval of the conceptual design development planning guidelines to rezone the above properties from R3, which is the current zoning, to Special Planning District Number 2. Because they found that the lands permit for ingenuity, imagination, design efforts on the part of the builders, architects, site planners, developers that can produce residential developments which are in keeping with the overall land use intensity and open space objectives while departing from the strict application of use setback height and minimum lot size requirements contained in the ordinance. And that long paragraph is basically the basis on which the legislative body needs to make the decision to do the rezoning. So along with this, I supplied the January 8th, 2015 Planning Commission resolution, the proposed Special Planning District 2 Conceptual Development Plan and Guidelines, the December 11th minutes, and the draft January 8th, 2015 minutes, and additionally an aerial map of the subject site. At this stage, the process requires, for rezoning, the code requires that there's a public hearing process by City Council. So tonight we have the Finance Committee review of the proposal, and then in the RCA, I have a recommended timeline for the public hearing and review of the ordinance if it proceeds through those processes. So there's at least one representative from the applicant here if the committee has questions particular for the applicant.
Well, my only question is, I mean, you talked about the 55 and older community, and you said it would be limited to that. And it says to residents, that doesn't necessarily mean occupants. So my question would be, and I guess, I don't know, when you say residents, does it mean the leaseholder, or does it mean you rent it to your grandma, then your whole family moves in that are younger than that?
No, the occupancy, the people that can occupy the property.
And how do you enforce
unit.
that, I guess is the question.
It gets it can get a little tough. It would have to require a little bit of effort, but if it really you started seeing a lot more parking, the initial construction of parking that's going to be constructed is 153 parking spaces, which is about 1.17 spaces per unit, which the applicant has found to be consistent with their other senior-only developments throughout western New York and Pennsylvania. Planning Commission was a little concerned about that, so that was part of the discussion on December 11th. The applicant came back with land banked parking up to 288, which would be the typical code requirement for a multifamily development in the city per the regular zoning code. So if it was found that that wasn't senior only anymore, it would take some surveillance by planning staff to kind of see, vehicles coming and going, people coming in and out of the property.
What would happen though, I guess?
Well, as part of the development, the guidelines for the development, which is basically the zoning code for the special planning district, it's going to be explicit in there that it's for senior only. And if it's determined that it's not senior only occupancy, then they're violating the zoning of the special planning district, which then effectively they're in violation of the zoning code, and they either need to revert that or amend these development guidelines through the Planning Commission, City Council process.
I'm trying to find what the penalty would be again. I mean, I guess we just did that. I mean, it would be a penalty where it would be a fine, I guess.
Well, I mean, if they persisted to not go through the process or change their operations, then we could take them to court. In the court process, the fines would be levied through what's being kind of in the process right now with 1103.99.
I think this is the same thing that we were talking about in Ward 4. a senior only. I think everybody was okay with that. I think people were just more concerned of just opening it up and having it at least to anyone. And having it making it sure that it was only at least to senior-only housing. If we were going to do any type of revision to any kind of zoning code and increase the occupancy level per acre, it would be limited to.
Yeah, and the concern would be, and there's triggers in the conceptual guidelines that say, if it's determined by the city that there's a parking problem, which could be created by, it could still be continue to be senior housing, and then the occupants of senior housing start parking on the islands, parking in the grass.
Well, I mean, I
We
understand
can
the parking in a
implement more
senior,
parking.
but I mean, that's not as much I'm concerned on, because in that area, maybe you could walk to most of the areas, and you could do, the parking's not the concern, it's the residents living there. Because if you're, say, senior, then you have like 20%, you get 100% senior for a while, then it backs down to 80, 50, then the seniors that are living there, they're gonna move out because they wanna live there because all their seniors are living there. I mean, that's the only reason. And the more people that you don't have living there, the seniors, then all of a sudden you change the neighborhood, quote unquote, and all of a sudden now we just have a regular apartment complex, which I don't know if everybody,
That's almost exactly what's happened to Forest Meadows Villas behind me. Although they put the limit to age 50, but there's still college-age kids living there with mom and dad.
right, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
That's why I said
That's why I
occupancy.
asked that the SPD specifically limit age 55.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
enforcement of it can be tricky, and you have to spend some time kind of really understanding people coming and going, sitting and hanging out while they come and go. And, you can sometimes tell when there's that age difference. So it would just be something you'd have to, but it would be more about, I think from a planning and zoning perspective, it's more about what does that change in occupancy do as a land use impact? And for the planning commission, really their position was like the land use impact could be more cars being required because, non-senior housing typically has more vehicles per unit than senior housing. So that was the logical connection where they said, the best way we can manage it from a land use perspective is by the parking impact that can occur.
What
We
about
could have
decrease?
something that could transition back and forth between senior and non-senior only, and there could never be a zoning impact. There could be a police impact, there could be other impacts, school impacts, but there's not necessarily going to be, that doesn't necessarily a trigger that creates a land use impact.
Well, I think, that's our challenge that I'm always challenged with, especially when we're looking at Ward 4, is if it's gonna be senior, it's all great today, we're all holding hands, 10 years from now, it's not. We've seen that numerous times. Why would we wanna do it?
And there's a lot of other developments, the one that's being proposed in Ward 4, that's, tax credit, so that's, legally required to be senior housing.
Well, there's also, we
The
talked
federal
about deed
government gives tax
restrictions, to
credits.
deed restrict the property, because it
Yep.
gives a little different enforcement avenue when you have a deed restriction that's violated, than just a zoning ordinance.
And as part of the, it can be doubled up. I think the one where we can require it is through the development guidelines of the SPD. And then if we find that they're not senior housing anymore, they need to either amend it or go back to being senior.
Well, I guess the question is, I don't think
Special
anybody here is concerned with the senior housing. I think that's probably what we'd want to see, because it's a less impact on the community than it would be with having a regular apartment complex of that size, from a policing perspective, from all these other use perspectives. And that's, the biggest risk that we have here is that what we're being told actually happens for a period of 20 years or longer. That's what our job is, to figure out, because sure, you're telling us in day one that, yeah, this is what's gonna happen, but we all know, you live it.
I'm living it.
Doesn't happen. It's all because there's money involved, and when there's money involved and you're not getting the seniors there, you have to rent them out. So how do you rent them out? You rent them out to anybody. That's just capitalism. That's what you do.
Sounds like from experience.
I think that trigger and that ability is there from the city perspective, as it's very explicit in the development guidelines, conceptual development guidelines, that this is senior only. And
Well, I
if it's
understand
not- No, I know, but if it's not, if they change that, they're violating the zoning code, and then we have a specific trigger to go and say, no, you can't change it without getting approval through the.
But I guess I just want to
through
make
the
sure that that
legislative
enforcement
process.
arm that you're talking about has enough teeth to say, well, you know, we're just gonna keep renting it out, you're gonna get some zoning violations, but at least the rent's more than the violation, so we'll just continue to violate it. And I mean, can we shut it down? Is our ultimate goal to shut the complex down? Can you?
Well, from my understanding, through the violation process through the municipal court, through the court system, there's jail time potential and fines. So, I don't know if Mr. Huber wants to provide more information about that process, but ultimately, there is potential for jail time. So, a business owner of the scale of Clover Construction probably doesn't want to go to prison or be.
No, again, not to scare, but I mean, everybody wants a senior facility there. We
Yeah.
don't want another apartment complex where we have to deal with, you know, the issues that come along with that. I mean, if we did, we would be zoning a lot of the property in the city to just wide open apartment complexes, I imagine. So the bigger concern is just to deal with the 55 and over issue. And do we feel comfortable enough that we're gonna be protected? So as a Ward 1, it'll be in Ward 1, are you comfortable enough 10 years from now that you're not gonna be getting calls saying, hey, you know, what's going on over here? I thought you guys said it was gonna be 55 and over, it's
That was one of
not.
the issues I brought up at the December 11th,
11th or something.
was, you know, exactly what you said. 10 years from now, they can't rent them, they got vacancies, what do you do? You start renting to people that aren't seniors. How do you stop that? One of the things they brought up was a deed restriction, but when you started asking questions about the deed restriction, it was the buyer themselves putting the deed restriction on it, so they're the grantor, which means they can yank that deed restriction anytime they want.
Well, if you put a third-party beneficiary of the city in there, it's a little more difficult. I think Huber you could make a third-party beneficiary to the restrictive covenant, another entity, that the city would be, and the city would have the enforcement rights, but.
Well, John, you deal with real estate a lot more than we do, so if you're saying that the deed restriction is the best method to protect the city's.
Well, it gives you
interest-
other avenues to pursue enforcement,
Right.
rather than through the zoning code. I mean, it's just another avenue of enforcement, I guess.
Yeah, that's a little complicated, you know, then you have to wait for the court hearing and all the other things.
Because of the violation of it, I guess that's the other point. I mean, what does it mean when you say that? What does it actually mean of a violation? Does it mean you have 131 units, I think? Does it mean if there's 2 units that rented to somebody under 55, is that a violation? Because there's going to be, there's going to be units that are going to be rented to not 55 and over, because there's not other funds attached to them, maybe. I mean, I don't know this, but I assume it's not federally mandated to have, like we were talking down in Ward 4, where there's funds attached to it, where if you violate that, I mean, there's some serious
You lose the funding.
you lose the funding and criminal penalties associated with it. So I don't know the answer. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because it's the whole city. We're all okay and all good with the 55 and over sitting here now, but then the issues come up later on of how do you handle those
We
situations
want to
with.
protect our interests, not get.
Correct, that's all. Yes, sir? Yes.
Yeah, John Hines, representing Clover Construction. Yeah, Clover Construction, they're in the independent living business. That's their business model. That's what they're here asking for. I understand no one has a crystal ball, but that was, if we were to go for the R4 zoning and get several variances, those are granted per the property, for the life of the property, and change in use or not. So we decided under the special district use, this gives the power back to the city to, if they ever change the business model, go to under 55 and older, they're changing the use. So that was determined, because deed restriction was proposed to your law director, and it came back that no, the design guidelines cover it. So if we're taking a step back now,
Well, actually, I wanted both. I wanted a deed restriction and the language included in this. Did the deed restriction get left off of this, John? Because that's what I wanted to keep in.
It was not explicit in the design guidelines, but we can, it was part of their proposal when they initially made the proposal for the special planning district. And it's something that during this process, it's not explicit in the development guidelines, it can be added in as explicit in the development guidelines.
I would recommend that. I thought we were going to be in there.
again, I think everybody's okay with the project that's being proposed. We just want to make sure that that's the project that's always there. That's all. I don't think we have any disagreement with the type of projects that your client or the company you work for operate, Clover Construction and these other jurisdictions. I think there's some here in Parma and Willoughby Hills. I think that's exactly what is needed and what we'd like to see. We just want to make sure it's always that.
And they've done their homework, Clover Construction. You have the demographics over 20,000 over 55 and continually aging.
Yeah.
So their business model, I'm sure, is planned out past 10, 15-year philosophy. People are getting older every day.
No, but
And it's a niche market. They're popping up, you know.
And is it-
Bill is approved and going to start construction.
Is there any
this spring.
issues with that, having the SPD and the deed restriction to make, we just want to make sure that, for example, not to say it would happen, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe the company, your owners unfortunately pass away or something, and the kids don't want it, they sell it, and who knows what would happen? I mean, it would be, whoever bought it, buys it, will do whatever they want with it. And I
Then they
think-
would have to show up and go through
Right,
the process.
right,
of-
and then we have
because they're no
enforcement
longer
arms,
in
right.
that zoning district.
I mean, I think that's
In
our
that
biggest
use.
concern, is the enforcement. Do you guys agree?
Yes, I absolutely agree.
And this is totally off the subject, it's just personal, but not that I'm gonna go run a place, but I see it's, your proposed concept is 3 stories. Does these buildings have elevators in them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, fully handicapped. The tubs have the doors that walk in, the toilets are lower. So it would take a retrofit to become a normal apartment.
Okay.
And that's their business model. The elderly are moving in, you said it. They do not want the teeny boppers
Yeah.
running down the halls, the kids running down the halls. That's the draw to the property, is that it is seniors only. They're independent living, there's no food, you know, they come and go. That's what they're focused on. They're either Florida birds here for the summer, you know, and that's the niche. That's the clientele really is people from your own community traveling less than 5 miles to move into this place.
Mark?
I mean, I know this land's been vacant for quite some time, and there's been a couple options on this property. Is there any concerns with a couple things, the driveway that's going to be coming out on Huntington? I don't know if this is the time to talk about it or not, but as I look at the concept, what about the traffic impact through there? Does the administration have any concern about this volume, trying to get on a tough area right there in Huntington Street? I mean, obviously, Minor Drive's a little slower paced, but I just didn't know if that was a concern that was brought up in Planning Commission.
Not in great detail, because the way the special planning district legislation in the zoning code is laid out, there's a conceptual stage that basically is the rezoning that brings about the basic idea, the basic plan, and then a preliminary and final site plan review, where the more detailed, like actual site engineering, building heights, grading is really hammered out. And that's one question I'll make a note to make sure that that's in there, that we get some information or some analysis on that traffic impact. I think 131 units, if it does stay at a one parking space per residential unit, probably shouldn't be much more on a per unit basis than some of the single family nearby that might have 3 or 4 cars coming and going. And with the distributed network where someone can go out on a Minor or out onto Huntington, that should alleviate. But for the preliminary and final site plan review, I'll make sure that that's one of the items that's explicitly reviewed in that process, so.
And one of the things about peak times, and which is the key issue with traffic studies, these people aren't getting up and going to work by 8 a.m. They're the off-peak drivers. They're leaving at 10:30 when everyone else is at work and the traffic's died down. They come back before 4, you know.
Yeah,
things like
I
that.
understand where you come from. My mom's would qualify for this, and she's still working, and she's up early, so. That's, there's another thing is, I see the driveway on the Minor Drive is that cutting into, is that your guys' parcel, or is that cutting into a?
That's also.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually 3 parcels, and there's a little triangular parcel that
Okay.
comes out, and it's actually about 120 feet of width along the Minor Drive frontage.
And what are the plans for the properties that, on the, I guess it'd be the north side of this project, are you guys gonna put any kind of buffer between the existing homes?
Yes, there is a vegetated buffer, and they have an existing fence that's pretty dilapidated, so that'll come up in future discussions, I'm sure that.
Because, I mean, this is gonna be a three-story unit, which,
There is quite an
it's-
elevation change.
yeah.
And we did orientate the building, so those lots are looking at the narrow portions of the wings. They're only
Uh-huh.
looking at 65 feet and 65
Right,
feet. So
right.
You're not gonna see the whole building.
And when you say
from one lot.
vegetation, are you saying trees? or-
Shade trees and pine trees usually
Okay,
mix.
that will
to
get a certain height
vertical
then.
element,
Okay.
because if we were to go put a fence down along the property line, those people are gonna look right over the fence.
Oh,
Because
no.
we're 15 feet
Sure,
above it. So
sure.
that doesn't work. So we were gonna do a vegetated buffer right along the edge of pavement.
Okay. And I mean, you guys addressed my other concern with the 55 of the senior community. I think that's important, but I just had a couple additional.
I've got just one more question you might be able to answer or may not. In your other facilities that you've been involved with, is there a percentage that, of the people 55 and over that lease these, on the government assistance,
Now you
subsidized,
say government assistance.
subsidized rent or lease?
Typically, and this is sketchy ground how I say this, but typically you will not qualify for, the voucher will not be enough to quantify moving into our facility
Okay.
at fair market rate.
Okay.
Right.
Is that,
Right.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
politically correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, the vouchers only go, these are, all how many bedrooms would these you say?
They're typically around 95% two bedrooms and a couple one bedrooms. So this count is.
So their rent's higher than the voucher
Right,
would be.
right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brian, you have anything, because this is your ward?
No, there's some of the issues, Mark already brought up the issues that I brought up at the last meeting. I had talked to, I don't remember how many, I think there's 27 properties that surround it, and I think I talked to 13 of them. And none of them were for or against it, that they were kind of indifferent about what happened with the property, but they did bring up the issues about the age, the issues about the barrier between the two properties. And then the only other issue was the issue with drainage. They just wanted to make sure the drainage didn't get any worse than what it already is when they start grading that property, because it's all downhill onto those properties on Huntington Street.
Yeah, and that's an issue that came up, and effectively this land is never developed, so it's basically raw, original land. So in these types of situations, a new development actually can improve the drainage of a site to adjacent properties. And that will all be, like I told Mr. Colazar, the preliminary and final site plan review will really hammer out that site engineering and make sure that there's sufficient, particularly one of the concerns for one of the neighbors on Birch Hill was headlights coming north off of this property into their backyard. We'll work with the applicant to make sure there's sufficient landscaping buffer to reduce that impact and reduce the visuals and make sure that the site engineering, which the engineering department will definitely be able to address, will be appropriate and probably improve the drainage in that.
Now, do we have
neighborhood.
a 55-year-old community, isn't it? Like Camelot or behind Camelot, isn't there a 50, do we have
That's
one?
Meadows Village, that's what I'm
Is that
talking
what
about.
that's the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's.
It's not 50.
Is the building is assisted living, but behind there is.
Yeah, but the villa's back.
Villa's,
It's
only the
between
villa part,
Camelot
not-
Place and Elmwood, or Elmcroft, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Right,
independent living.
Independent.
Same
living.
as
Okay, I get it.
Nottingham Court.
Okay, that's what I was thinking about.
Right.
That's right. Okay, that's what, okay.
Okay.
I see.
Mr. President, if I can just, regarding the deed restriction, so I can work that language into the design guidelines and get that to the council clerk so that it can be ready for, the public hearing time when that happens, so that
Sure.
that packet can have that information in there. Additionally, there was additional information that Mr. Huber had reviewed. Planning Commission in their recommendation wanted Mr. Huber to address my writing of a requirement for keeping a senior-only residency and occupancy. And he added just a little bit of extra text that said that paraphrasing, specifically understand that if the senior occupancy restriction is removed or altered, parking spaces on the subject property must be expanded to meet the current city requirements. So that'll be additional language that would be added into the design guidelines, along with the deed restriction requirement.
Now, is that required to go back to council or just to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to get a variance?
No, you have to, it's basically like amending a zoning
Okay, so
code.
amending.
It's a planning commission, city council, just like this current first round process. To amend the SPD requires the full process.
Okay.
And just a note, so I can address at public meetings, Clover has authorized Polaris Engineering, my employer, to go ahead and start a preliminary utility drainage plan and all that sort of stuff. So I have contacted the city engineer and the Medina County sanitary engineer, and we're all gonna get in one room prior to that public meeting and hash out some of these things preliminarily, which is a bonus for us. They usually don't pull the trigger until
Okay.
they have a project on those kind of dollars with me.
Sure, sure.
What are your plans with the remaining open space on this parcel?
It'll remain open as far as I know for now. They usually don't do any out parcels or anything like that. They're in the business of independent living.
Well, and that's what I think, it's a
Yeah.
great opportunity for seniors to have a park-like setting right on their own property, and I would like to throw
Yeah,
that
that's,
out there.
I've
that-
never seen anything different than, they actually provide me a schematic plan, and it's always just been this building.
So if they.
Like, we have one going in Brunswick right now, through the planning commission, it's a rezone typical project. But it's right on, I'm trying to, Pearl and, yes, it's an old, car dealership. So they're probably gonna bring in, there is an out parcel project for that, but the seller is dealing with that and maybe bringing in an IHOP or a Dunkin' Donuts, something like that, but that's all on the seller side, so.
Right.
This is from the sister's business.
So you wouldn't be opposed to planting more trees or anything on that open space area?
There's always a dollar. We are a market rate, so the more we put in, the more we have to charge.
Sure.
That type of situation, so.
Anything else?
I do have one other question. I don't know if this is for Jonathan or for Mr. Huber, but in helping us police the 55 and older, could we use school records to see, like, addresses for the kids? Is that something that we could do?
If we see that the kids are coming out, if they're seeing like their kids coming out of this development potentially, or it might just be you just kind of go surreptitiously and ask for applications for the spot, or you just go to them periodically and say what's going on.
Okay.
So it'd take a little bit of work beforehand before you really start going at them, but I think there's ways to kind of keep an eye on it, make sure it stays senior.
And one of the other things to give you sort of comfort level with Clover, Clover is an owner-operator, so they don't just build this and hand it over to another management company. It stays in the Clover family. It goes from Clover Construction, which is their acquisition entity, to Clover Management. So it's all managed throughout the life of the property by the same person who built it. This is what they do, I just can't emphasize that enough to try to help you.
No,
see that.
I think there's no issue with the current developer. It's just 10 years from now. I mean, I think it's all going to be fine in the short term, but we're looking at the long term. That's usually what the issues arise. It doesn't arise usually in the short term with that.
Just, the reason why we're skeptical is the organization that I keep referring to, it's the same last name. Grandpa had it, now the grandkids have it. Okay? We're
Catch
limited.
me up on that one though, because I'm
I
not
will
aware.
after the
How
meeting.
was that
After the meeting.
approved?
Okay.
All
All right.
Well, it's not a question of approval. What happens is these properties change owners and get sold, and there's some churning that goes on where you make a profit by conducting a sale. In the last 10 years, this has happened, and the people who own sell to somebody different, and a new person has a different, or a new entity has a different philosophy, and that's what the issue is. That's what John's talking about. It's not a question of Clover. It's 10 years from now, and we've seen it happen. And that's what Paul's talking about. So it's a problem.
And not only we can enforce the best we can to keep it the way we originally was approved, then we don't really have any problem if we can do that. I think that's the whole goal. And if that's what we could do, then we do it, because we'll get the phone calls. maybe not, maybe we won't be on by 10 years, or so, but somebody will get the phone calls asking that question. But we appreciate all your, you know, coming in and giving us, guidance. Anybody have any other comments on this or questions, or? We're all good with that? Then we go, I think the next thing's a public hearing, is that what
Yes.
happens?
Yes.
So we don't have to do anything, I guess, we just have to, you're just bringing it before us, before it goes to the public hearing, and then it'll go,
Yeah, and then, you know, it's a public hearing, and then there's a 30-day minimum notice requirement before a city council public
yes,
hearing.
right,
And then, you know, then after that, it moves forward to an ordinance, would be either on that same public hearing night or at the next available city council meeting.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, anything
Thank
else?
you all.
Great, thank you. Next item is 1521, ordinance 1211, sports activity fee. Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. In December of last year, we discussed the ordinance 12-11, the sports activity fee, at the Sports Advisory Committee meeting. Typically, our registration for youth sports associations starts beginning of January. So we had a meeting in December to discuss what was going to be required of those associations. And I expressed some concerns with the way rosters and schedules were being submitted, because obviously last year I didn't have enough time to make those changes. So with the year coming, we discussed 4 amendments to the ordinance that'll both benefit the city and the sports associations. The ordinance that was submitted and the changes that are in front of you are basically to remove Mountville Township from all sections of the ordinance, because we only regulate games that are on city Medina property or fields that we maintain. So we'd be taking that out, as well as getting rid of the requirement for the rosters to have addresses and date of birth of participants as a privacy issue. The Parks Department will actually benefit from just the name of the team, the coaches, and the participants, so we know exactly who's on our field at what times. So that'll be beneficial for us. The third thing we're omitting is the requirement for a sports association president to sign the individual waiver on behalf of the association. The law department's advised that we just need the actual participant's signature. So that'll eliminate some paperwork. And then an addition is to add a requirement in the sports activity fee that if a association plans on advertising or having sponsorship on city property, that they will enter into a license agreement with the city, so we can regulate what type of signs are up and for how long, and on what fields. So those are the changes. I'm sure you're aware of the many discussions that we've had with various associations about the waiver requirement. The waiver was typically a portion of the social or sports activity permit, which has been in place for quite some time, and we got rid of it back in 2011. So the waiver enforcement was new to the associations. Mr. Huber, Mayor Hanwell, and myself have resolved all the association's issues, and they have agreed to the requirements for the registration process for 2015. So those are the changes.
So all the associations are comfortable with this?
Correct. The sports registration was last weekend, and it's all part of their process.
Now, we put Montville in there for some reason before, why are we taking it out? We just did it.
Because they built
No,
parks.
no, Montville, we did it because Montville, with the fields were being used in conjunction, it has nothing to do with the building of the, I'm trying to figure out, back in 2011, why we put Montville.
With the SAP forms, we did give Montville a portion of the SAP fees. Now, we have player fees that are only for Medina
Using our
Sports
fields.
Association using our fields.
So these won't. we wouldn't
So
include
the reason
ones
it was
that
in there, I don't
would
have
be
that
played on
explanation.
those
That's why I
fields.
decided to omit it.
And we're still requiring original signatures.
Correct. Until we have more information on clicker app agreements.
Mr. Huber does. I kind of disagree with Mr. Huber in that regard, but we can disagree.
Irregardless.
Very good. So I don't believe you need to have original signatures.
For,
Well, there's difference in opinions as far as what you're gonna pursue in court.
Electronic versus original.
Electronic.
There's not enough case law yet on the electronic, and we're not comfortable with transferring that. Mr. Coyne has the rest of us, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Huber's always going to be in court fighting these things, so we want him to be comfortable.
Gonna have Mr. Coyne come to court.
I don't go to court, but that's my only problem with this, is I don't believe original signatures
You don't believe what?
or you need original signatures. I mean, there's an Ohio statute that says electronic signatures.
So you agree to disagree?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
We should probably defer to the guy who does go to court though, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you want to, but I disagree. The statute been in law since 2002, I think, that says, and in real estate, we don't use original signatures. Email signatures are fine. For all the agreements I have.
I just want to thank the mayor and Jansen and Greg, because I know when this first came out, the sports associations were a little nervous, and there was a lot of emails flying and everything, so I appreciate everybody's work to get them to a place where they were comfortable with it and serve both purposes of the city and the associations. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm with Jim too, I had a couple calls, and I appreciate you guys working it out. From what I've heard, I think everybody's comfortable, so.
That's what I hear too.
Any other comments?
Move to approve?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one we have is 1522, discount on membership to recreation center. Okay?
Yes, sir. We were approached by Lafayette Township with a request to ask that their safety forces, in their case, it's just fire, because they contract with Medina County Sheriff's Department for police coverages, be permitted to have some sort of discount for the rec center, either similar to our residents or something, as a result of being a JED member. So I talked that over with Mike. I talked to Lafayette Township and Montville Township, because I felt what we did for one, we should do for the other. Montville is just the reverse. They have their own police department, but not a fire department, because they use our staffing. Mike felt the most appropriate would be to give them a corporate member discount, because those things are already in place. And the potential that we're looking at, if everybody would join, is on the Lafayette Fire Department. They have roughly 50 to 60 people, and Montville has 25 members. Now, those numbers are not just the firemen and police officers. Those are clerks and clerical staff and whatever else they may have. So then, there's really two questions. One is whether or not we're open to discuss that, and then second of all, whether we want to restrict it to safety forces alone or open it up. I'm of the opinion that the more people we get into the rec center and using the existing staff and facilities that we have, just helps us spread those costs out, over.
So would the discount be just on, I guess it would be as if they were a city resident with a 20% discount, or would it be is there a non-resident 20% discount?
It's a corporate
resident, 20% discount on the corporate plan.
So I guess the only question is, do you think that they all should be without paying the income tax, or do you think that they should get some benefit, which I'm in the camp of, and just limit it to the safety forces? I think we owe it as an obligation to all safety forces to make sure that they have an opportunity to work out and stay fit because of their jobs.
I agree with you, but I think I would probably ask to increase it more in the organizations or the companies that are members of the JED. Do they have the ability now to apply for a corporate?
I mean, every business in the JED you're talking about?
The ones that are participating in the JED.
Oh, they get a discount too, you're talking about?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, I agree with the mayor, the more money coming in is beneficial to us. I mean, you gotta take the wear and tear and but I agree with the safety forces, but I would like to suggest that the members of the JED, the companies that are actual members, it should be afforded to them too.
I don't know how many people are qualified or are on the, chamber membership, but the chamber already has that. Any business that's in the chamber gets a 20% discount. So, they already get the resident in 20%. So it covers probably those other things in the chamber.
But if, say like the University of Akron out there in Lafayette, they may not be a member of the chamber, so they could take advantage of this.
You bring up safety services, which, I agree with, but, I know Medina Township's not in the JED, but, I know their safety services come in to help us numerous times, and I would like to see, just safety, maybe they have an option of something.
I'm hoping this may present an incentive for Medina Township to consider a JED, instead of talking about it.
Well, I guess I'm not worried about the JED. I'm worried about, and I respect that. I'm just worried about that those men and women come in, we do joint efforts many times on serious situations. I think that, to me, is an olive branch. You could reach out to them as well, just for the safety, that they have an option on this too. Now, with the, with the companies that are in the JED, like Denny brought up, I mean, if they're not with the chamber, I mean, most of the time, Kimberly, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, majority of the companies you would think would join the chamber coming in, right? Or do you see any?
Yeah, I think most of them are joining. I mean, pretty much all the small businesses that we're meeting with are joining the chamber and Main Street, or one or the other.
And then I go,
And on your comments, I mean, I agree that Medina Township does, they do assist the city. But I would have to stick with the mayor that I don't understand why Medina Township hasn't joined the JED. Logically and financially, to me, it doesn't make any difference. So if that would be a incentive, if they see that their safety forces are able to acquire these discounts, that might be another area that would give them some incentive to join the JED.
and Mike, with this volume that we're talking here, you're comfortable that our existing patrons, I mean, obviously, if it gets a little more crowded, it'll be effective, but it's not gonna be overwhelming where we're gonna lose members because the influx.
Ideally, I would say it's definitely a plus to have safety forces in the building anyway. I can't tell you how many times even like nurses from the clinic have helped in emergency situations, so the consideration was for safety forces. We were talking about opening it up to all the businesses, now that's a different story.
Well, that's.
I would have to research and see how many people are, how many corporations are already signed up for the.
I don't think we have many in the JED right now. I think there's just
Right.
Okay.
they're already involved, I think, already. I mean, the only concern I have is the difference between the non-resident fee and expanding that, or doing exceptions to that. I mean, that's I think what we're talking about here is it just limited to the officer that's there, or do you want the secretary and their family and that involved? And I kind of don't want to, I'm kind of trying to make sure we keep that difference between non-resident who doesn't pay the income tax or is not in the school district, which Lafayette people would not be. I think they're a Cloverleaf. Is that right?
There's a small little part of Lafayette Township that's in the school district.
And those who, I mean, I don't know, that's what I've been wrestling over in my mind is, do you want to expand it to that, or do you want to just keep it to the officers and the safety force people to keep them healthy and give them a benefit, a discount, whatever that may be, or do you want to open it up to their family? And I understand the mayor's point, but I guess I'm questioning, well, then when people view that as, well, they're non-residents and they get the benefit, I don't want to start getting involved in those discussions about who should or who shouldn't.
What do we do with the current corporations that have the corporate discount and have employees that live outside the city?
They're a corporation that's in the city, I guess.
Yeah, there's a corporation
They're
that's
paying
in the
income
city,
tax.
so why couldn't we treat
They're paying income
an
tax.
entity inside the JED who's paying income taxes to the city the same way?
We would, but I guess that they're not. So I'm trying to get confused there. Lafayette Township is not paying
Right,
income
but
tax.
they do have, they're not taking the income tax in the JED?
They're not paying any income tax in the JED.
They don't have anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, but when they do,
Well, that company would be paying income tax.
Right, okay, all right, but the, okay, I see where you're going, the Lafayette Township itself is.
Does not.
Got it, got it.
Just, I mean, I don't know, that's the question.
For clarification, we never talked about families, we're just talking about the members of the safety force.
Oh, but I mean, that goes to the next step, is the family of this, I mean.
Yeah, well, I'm not promoting.
Oh,
But yeah.
So you're just right now asking for,
Either the safety forces or the departments, you know.
I mean, their departments aren't that big.
Right,
either.
exactly, exactly.
So we're talking a maximum of 85 people.
Right, if everybody joined. Right.
And I guess I don't know how,
And some
when they come to
members-
join, how do you do that? Do you just, if they want to bring their whole family in, do you give them the discount? How does that work when you practically at the desk?
Yes, and it's
Is that
easier.
is that what they do?
It's easier that way. I mean, you would think they'd want to work out for families or swim or, you know, use
Right,
the facility,
right,
of
right.
course, as an individual.
So you give them a well, you give them the discount on the family, or you give them a discount on the individual, and they pay the difference? How does that,
It would be for the whole family. That's how we would set it up. unless-
see, it would be for the whole family?
Well, I mean, it'd be an interesting figure. I don't know about the Lafayette Township's fire department, but I know Montville Township's got a pretty extensive, very nice workout facility and for the police and their department and the fire department, and LST uses it. It'd be interesting to see how many city police officers here that have a workout room here, how many of them actually belong to the rec center? Because they have the ability, the same as Montville, to work out when they're on duty. So I don't know, for Montville, I can't speak for Lafayette, but for Montville, I don't, you know, it might be 25 members, but I don't think it would be that huge of an impact for,
Well, that would be the only concern, as we just brought up, that they have these facilities in Lafayette. The only reason they.
I don't know if they do. If they-
I think they do in Lafayette, they have workout facilities.
Well, they have a rec center in Lafayette with their school,
Oh, you're talking about Cloverleaf.
Cloverleaf, but I'm talking about Montville Police has their own workout facility like here.
Well, the only advantage for Montville would be they can bring your family in for a 20% discount then.
Well, that's true.
So that would be that's what we were just talking about. Why do we want to do that? We want to help the officer or the department, but not the whole family. I mean, I guess, because then otherwise, if I'm a if I'm paying non-resident, I say, well, geez, if I, how do I get my?
Don't join the police department.
I guess that's one way to do it.
It's an incentive.
I mean, I don't know the answer. That's what I bring up. I mean, I understand you want everybody working out, but I think you have to be a little bit sensitive to the non-residents. They're gonna be thinking, hey, what are you guys doing now? Why would I do it? So, I mean, I don't know the answer. That's just something that kind of concerning. So what do you guys want to do?
I'm comfortable with it.
Comfortable with what?
With the safety forces from both townships.
And their families.
Well, if it's, they're getting a corporate rate, and any corporate rate, just like the corporations that, pay, the individual may live in Homerville, works in the city of Medina, and yeah, he pays income tax, but he gets a corporate rate, and that means his wife and 15 kids can come for that corporate rate. They don't work in the city of Medina.
But they're not paying income tax.
Yeah. I mean, I see your.
And then there's safety forces, and then there's departments too.
Yes.
So are you okay with both, or just safety forces?
No, I'll retract the JED companies. I'm talking about safety forces.
Only.
But
Police and fire.
Mayor, this is actually anybody who works for Montville or works for Lafayette.
No, these numbers were Lafayette Fire Department
Department.
and Montville Police
Okay.
Department.
Okay.
But when he gave me the police department, and I think when they gave me Lafayette, it wasn't just firefighters, it was,
The department.
if they have a janitor, if they have a clerk. if they have a-
Okay.
I guess I can
But
go
now we're back to just safety. forces.
Yes,
I
sir.
could go with this, the safety forces, the departments, but not their families. I'm okay with that. But I don't know how you do that at the rec center.
That's
Can you
tough.
control
Well,
that
it's
much?
exactly, it's exactly what you're saying, and we would take the discount for the individual, and then if they want to join for the family, we would just subtract.
Because it
off
could be
that
four in
amount
the family, then you
for
just
family,
4 times this amount be 320.
So discount for the actual safety,
Well, I mean, we want to promote
Individual.
that, I think that's something.
regular for the individual's family.
Right.
Mike, if some of the corporate members are,
The
if some of the corporate people are chamber members but aren't in the city, is that right?
but- Right.
Okay, so what's the difference there?
Why do we do
So
that?
chamber members that have their business, well, because they're a chamber member and we're giving the chamber membership
The
a
corporate
corporate
discount.
discount. So I guess I don't see a great deal of difference with
Well,
that.
there's not, but I wonder why we're doing it.
Well, we're doing it because we agreed that we would treat the chamber as a corporation and everybody that joins the chamber, whether the business is in the city or not, because they're a chamber member, they get the benefit.
I got you.
In this
And again,
case,
we're
this
bringing
case,
money
we're,
in.
we're kind of saying the
Yeah,
same
as long-
thing.
I don't think we're gonna, you're right, I don't think the number of people are gonna all come on the same day, the
Right,
rest of it's gonna be
right.
crowded.
In this case, we're saying there's a benefit to having a JED with the city
That's
by
right.
offering
That's
it.
right. No, I understand, I'm just trying to go through it, I mean, I was unaware of that, maybe I didn't think about it, maybe it was always there, I just never thought about it, but that is kinda strange, I mean,
Well, I wasn't aware it included the families either until Mike just shared that.
Well, when we're reviewing the, adding the families too, the idea is to bring on more people. The more they have, the more they qualify for the higher discount. We were gonna lock them in at 20 if it was families, because they would definitely reach the threshold that we require for a 20% discount. If it's just individuals, they might not reach it. First year, they'd get 20, unless you just approved that we would lock
well,
them in at 20.
I guess the difference would be, I mean, they're at 700 for a family or something like that, and it's 560, I mean, we're dropping them down to 560 already, plus giving another 20 on top of that, which is,
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, you get the resident rate, even if they qualify for 0 discount, they'd still get the resident rate, so it's a great deal too.
so maybe you just give them the resident rate, I mean, I don't know, I mean, we're talking about a discount, the discount is the resident rate. Going from the non-resident rate to the resident rate is a big discount, I mean, that's $200, $200 some dollars a year, without giving them a discount, I mean, I don't know, I guess that's, you think about it more, it's like, well, maybe the discount is saying we'll treat you like a resident.
It's still gonna be based on where they live. They live in Medina, and they're already getting resident rates, so it's really nothing for them if you don't give them a discount.
I know, but I think a lot of the people in Lafayette don't live in the city, because that's why they're in Lafayette, I mean, so.
Yeah, but this isn't necessarily their residence, it's people working at their fire department.
Well, I know, that's what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the savings. Right now, they would pay, as a family, they would pay $700. But if we say, okay, if you're employed as, in the safety force department, you'll be treated as a resident, which means, okay, now we automatically get like a $200 discount.
Not to muddy the waters even more, but I know 4 people that's on Lafayette Fire Department that live in the city of Medina.
That's
Well,
what
then they
my
get
point
20
is.
off of
And I know
that.
most of Montville Township, because they're
If you're a
school
city
district, they
resident
live there and
already,
they're school
then you get
district
additional
residents, so
20.
they're already getting the discount, they won't need this.
Well, I guess the question is, and Mark brings up a good point, maybe if they're not a city resident, they get the city rate, but if they are a city resident, they get the 20% off.
That really changes the membership policy.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit more complicated for them to, they're consistent now with this, it's easier to
Yeah,
administer.
he's got that corporate rate, and it's, it's easy to work with, and that's what we're used to.
Yeah.
So just by saying it rides on the same thing is a lot easier for us.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same for the chambers, which I didn't realize too, but that makes
So
sense.
this goes back to my question, goes back to my question originally. I don't have a problem giving.
Yeah, and I like the mayor's idea, we are bringing money in, even though it's at a discounted rate. In the non-residents that would be upset, easily say,
80% of one is a lot better than 0.
right?
Well, I agree with you, but we have non-resident, resident, we gotta be sensitive, I think. I mean, because
Then we have corporate.
pretty soon there'll be
We have
all
corporate.
have a group that they're in, and everybody will get a discount. I mean, that's kind of where we're gonna head, and I think it'll be there one day.
If you have a JED, it's corporate then. We're not treating you any differently.
No, I
than we treat
understand.
corporate.
No, but I mean, there'll be other groups that come in that, the
You'd be
same.
treating a little different if you just go with the individual. We would like to see, I would like to see family on there, but that's my opinion.
And Mike, probably the truth of the matter is, I mean, I think about for the schools, I have people who live in Cuyahoga County who work here. They're only getting single plans because it's convenient for them to go work out here. They're not having their whole family come down from Cuyahoga County. So, unless you live here,
Right.
that's where it becomes more convenient to go to our rec center. But I have a lot of employees who do not live here, but obviously they're paying income tax because they work for the schools. But they do only get a single plan then on the corporate rates.
And the corporate rate's 20% less than residential.
No, 20% off the resident. They're automatically gonna get the resident rate, they're gonna be treated like they're resident already. Once we say yes, they're treated as a resident.
Okay,
So they save that difference between non-resident and resident,
okay.
plus a 20%.
I will be in favor of it unless at some point in the future it affects the operations of the facility, then we can revisit it. But I agree with the mayor, bringing in more money is, even at a discounted rate, is better.
And I like the incentive that it encourages the JED.
Right.
But I still think we're leaving, part of this is safety services, and I think we're leaving out a decent group in Medina Township, both fire and police, that come in here, and, I mean, you know, so many people that live outside the city borders, they, you know, they live in Medina, this is a Medina community, and those services come in here, we see them all the time helping out, and I think we should at least, for Medina Township, safety forces, at least.
With all due respect, Mark, you know, coming from the police force, the chief's left, but, you know, we get as much participation from the sheriff's department, as much from the highway patrol, so, you know, pretty soon, you know, how far do you cast on that out? I guess I would feel more comfortable starting with Lafayette and Montville because of the Judd relationship, and open to revisiting it in the future, but I just assume try to take it in smaller steps than.
Because then we got the other question, what about the Cedar property? That's York Township.
Right.
They did it. But they don't have, they got fired, but I don't know how many of them would come now. Maybe they would, I don't know. Maybe they should be included. I don't
Or
know.
we're not benefiting it
We're not
at all.
benefiting
from
yet because we haven't
the
developed
Cedar
any of the
property.
Cedar.
Well, the Cedar property is in the city, because we annexed it, which is different than the Jet property.
Well, it's
Let's
only
just-
annexed,
let's
it's
just
only
stay on.
annexed when it's developed, though.
No, it's already annexed. It's already in the city, all the Cedar
Nah,
property. Yeah,
I'm not sure.
all the Cedar
that
properties,
right?
yes. We already have it all.
So all those hunters out there shouldn't be out there.
Well, probably not. Yeah, all that, there's 300 acres or something that's in the city now, or something over there in York, between Smith and.
I wish I knew I could hunt there.
Again, I agree with the mayor, and hopefully this will be a incentive that Medina Township eventually will join the JED, and then I would agree with Mark that
Right.
they too should be included.
Well said.
Well, we might want to look at that one if they ask York. I mean, we should give them the opportunity, I guess. I mean, it's only fair since they're already, they did it. They're the first ones that ever did it in 2001, I think, was it 2002?
3 is when we.
3, was it 3? So, I don't know, that's something to look at, but just as long as we're equally and fair to everybody, I mean, that's fine. Equally, equally fair, I said, not unfair. You're funny, okay. Any other questions?
So make a motion to extend the corporate discount to the safety forces of Montville and Lafayette Township based on their participation in Judge with the city of Medina.
The safety force departments? Or safety forces?
Safety forces.
Okay, not the departments.
Second.
So we're talking about sworn.
That's what his motion was.
Right. Okay, just so we know what it is.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. The next item we have is the, wait a minute there. Okay. 1523 preliminary agreement with Sealing Municipal Court. Patrick?
Thank you. Last summer, the council authorized the administration to advertise for request for qualification statement for architects for the courthouse project. We did do that. We received a total of 6 statements. From that, our review committee, and we set up a review committee of 6 people, 4 of which are here, I think. Myself, Lino, Jonathan, Danny. The judge, Matt Lanier, with the other 2 that are not here now, but the committee narrowed those down to 4 architects that we interviewed, went through the interview process, and we unanimously selected Sealing as the most qualified firm. Since then, we've been going back and forth with trying to come up with a scope for the agreement. We've done that and presented it to you here. I know there's a meeting scheduled for next week, so I'm not sure how far if you're gonna vote on this or not tonight, but I can tell you we're pretty happy with Sealing. The one thing I wanted to note about their agreement, this is a preliminary agreement. One of the 2 of the issues, first of all, is defining the actual project, and the second being the project delivery method, whether we do it a traditional design bid build, or we do it a construction manager risk. Until those 2 factors are known, the architect's role is really can't be totally defined. So we set up this preliminary agreement where they'll help us through those processes. Once those are identified, then we'll come back in the future and have a final agreement. That's in a nutshell what we're presenting here.
And if you recall, Monday, we have a meeting with the judge. I think we've all agreed, and unless we haven't, that the building is gonna be attached to this building and next to the police station, and the question is the size and the amount of money for it. I think we've come to the conclusion that a standalone building, whether it be on the site of the Masonic Temple or not, is not feasible because of the cost and the savings. Are we still on the same page with that? I think that's gonna come up Monday. It's gonna try to be a separate building again. Well, you're the only one that's on a different page.
Well, I'm clarifying your beginning remarks.
Okay, you're on a separate page, but everybody else here is on the?
Correct.
The same, okay.
Correct.
Because I think there's gonna be discussion by the judge to do a separate building again, and I don't know if you wanna go down that road again, as a group or not. I don't think so, but, that's gonna come up again. You're not on the same page?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They keep looking at me though.
I just like to look at you.
It's about-
Wait, that didn't sound right.
No.
So, I mean, it's a big step. I mean, this has been talked about with the judge and stuff, so we finally have an agreement where, once we all become on the same page with the judge regarding cost, size, and whatnot, then we can get the architect involved to do the design.
And the judge, just for the benefit of the rest of the council, the judge did share with Patrick and I that he's at a seminar, I think this week, out of town, but was fine with the agreement as proposed, and was just not able to be at the meeting as a result of being out of town. And he's looking forward to the February 2nd meeting.
I think we all are.
Can't wait. All right, any further discussion?
One thing I want to add,
Okay.
during our going back and forth with the negotiating process, remember we had a meeting here, I think it was the finance committee, where council had several suggestions. Those were incorporated into the final agreement. They include having the architect look at the Masonic building to determine if it could be repurposed. Also adding, when I had a kickoff meeting with the architect and council, that's in there as well. And the only other thing, there are some optional services here. We're not asking for those, for approval of those. If we decide, when we're going through the process that we want to do those, we'll come back to council and request that.
Make a motion to approve the preliminary agreement with Silling and Associates.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. 14-15-24 budget amendment. 8542 donation of flower urns.
Was a donation that we're going to use for flower urns, was a donation of $250. The city resident generally annually will provide a monetary donation to my office, and each time we've tried to use it for the flower urns just to keep the downtown enhanced.
Mayor, does that resident want to remain anonymous, or?
She didn't ask. It's Marcia Lincoln Hines, lives on North Huntington.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 1525 agreement with OHWARN.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the Medina County Emergency Management Agency, after our recent problems in receiving water from Avon Lake, has requested each of the communities in the region supplied by water by either Medina County or in our case, we have our own water, to join the Ohio Water Wastewater Agency Response Network. And what this is an agreement that to share equipment, valves, pipes, machinery in any water emergency. And it's a Ohio statewide process, and there's no cost to join. It's recommended by the EMA, and they're requesting the communities to join. I simply ask for your permission to do so.
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause?
All in favor with emergency clause?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, I think before we go into executive session, anything else that needs to come?
Can I ask one question, just for clarification? Mike and I are texting back and forth here. So when we said sworn, we mean sworn in families?
Correct. The corporate.
Yeah, but we didn't include other departments that are here. We don't include secretarial staff, we
No,
don't
no,
include
that's not
assistants.
sworn.
Right,
So
that's
sworn
right.
is all the police officers and all
And
the
their
firemen.
families.
Yes,
And not,
their families.
not anybody else.
I just, that was my, because we talked back and forth.
Because we talked about
so many
departments, we
times.
talked about the police
No,
department, which
right, right.
includes everybody in their
Yes,
department.
yeah, janitors, clerical, everybody, right. Okay, no, I got it. Just want to make sure I'm on the same page here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make a motion that we go into, or we enter into executive session at 6:56 PM for two purposes. The first is to consider the purchase of property for the purpose of the sale of property at competitive bidding, because premature disclosure would give an unfair competitive or bargain advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest, and also for conferences with the law director concerning disputes involving the city which are subject to pending or imminent court action.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lamb. Hilbert.
Yes.
Fields.
Yes.
Coin.
Yes.
Simpson.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6.
We'll be recessing in the executive session to discuss what the motion was. We will, coming out of executive session, taking no action on those items that were discussed, and adjourning the finance meeting thereafter. That's it.
It's,